All right. So this training is now officially being recorded, and it will be posted after the training to the ICSPS YouTube channel. And you can specifically find it on the ICCB playlist of that channel. The PowerPoint that I used during this presentation will also be shared via email after the training. And if you're watching this on YouTube as a recording, you can find the PowerPoint in the description. We have a pretty quick agenda today. I don't think that we'll spend the entire hour. So first we're going to review the instructional categories page and the fiscal, that should say fiscal funding sources. And then we're going to do a brief overview of each funding source and talk about the allowable uses of each of them. So let's go ahead and get started. When you log into DAISI, you should see something that looks similar to this. Again, I'm using the Program Administrator view today, so if your screen looks a little bit different from mine, then it's probably due to the access that you've been granted by your organization. And first we're going to go over the Instructional Categories page, which you can find under this Funding tab in the navigation bar. Now, when you click on this page, you'll find a list of each of the instructional categories. And at this point in the year, you should see them all filled out. So the checkboxes should correspond with the instructional categories that your organization offers. So at the beginning of each year, you have to select each of the boxes in order to indicate which instructional categories you are offering. If you hover over each of the checkboxes, you'll see a message that says, this instructional category has been used in the system, you cannot unassign it. So what that means is that there's already been a class that's assigned to this instructional category, so we can no longer uncheck this instructional category. So just make sure that these are filled out correctly at the beginning of the year, because once you start assigning courses to them, you can no longer change them, and it takes a little bit more work to correct that. Next, we're going to go over the fiscal year funding page. So when you click on the fiscal year funding page, you should see something similar to this. So there's now this enrollment report button in the top right corner. And when you click on it, you'll actually get you'll go straight to the enrollment report page of Pentaho. I'm not sure if it'll take me there because this is the demo site. Yeah, it's saying that it's not valid. But for you, it should take you to the enrollment report page in Pentaho. So you can run an enrollment report for your organization, see how your generation is doing in each of the categories. And you'll see each of the funding multipliers. Again, these are read-only fields, so you won't be able to change these, but it's just good to keep in mind what the generation amount is for each of the funding sources, for each of the instructional categories. And then finally at the bottom, we have this table that shows the funding source and the funding amount for your organization. And once, in order to add a funding source at the beginning of the year, you just click on this button, select the funding source, and then all of this information will come from your budget contract. And then you'll click Submit to save that. So again, this is stuff that happens at the beginning of the year. And once you've filled out all of your funding sources and you've created courses in these instructional categories and your courses begin to generate attendance, you should see these boxes begin to autofill. So it'll tell you how much money you've generated in each of these funding source categories according to the attendance in these categories, and it'll tell you the percent that you've generated to date. So this is something that it's good to keep an eye on throughout the year to see how you're doing in relation to the funding source requirements. And I know that a lot of people like to, before their contracts are fully signed and they finished all of that, they like to just put placeholders in here, like $1 or $1,000. Just make sure that as soon as your contract is settled, that you're updating these funding amounts, because otherwise your generation will not display correctly. That is pretty much what I had to show you as far as that goes. And now we're going to switch to the slideshow, and we're going to talk about each of these funding sources. So there are 4 different funding sources. We have Federal Basic, Integrated English Literacy and Civics, State Basic, and State Performance. And each of them has different parameters that dictate how you can use these funds. And if you'd like to learn more detailed information about funding sources, you can find that in Appendix C of the Fiscal Year 21 Adult Education Provider Manual, which starts on page 152. We're just going to be doing a very quick, very brief overview of the funding sources today. So each of the funding sources has a different series of instructional categories that you can use it for. So Federal Basic, you can use for adult basic education, adult secondary education, English as a second language, and high school completion. The IELCE money, this is for a subset of ESL or ELA, in that it must be used in combination with IET activities. State Basic and State Performance funds can be used for all of the instructional categories. So now, in order to kind of test your knowledge, we're going to do a series of true or false questions. So if you think you know the answer to these, go ahead and type them in the chat. So this first one is true or false. All instructional types can be funded with state basic funds. This is true. So, oops, I didn't mean to switch. So state basic and also state performance funds can be used for all of the instructional categories. Those are the 2 most flexible funding sources. Next, a vocational course can be funded with federal basic funds. True or false? This is false. Federal basic funds cannot be used to fund vocational or foreign language GED classes. Next, true or false? ESL classes can be offered using IELCE funding to any ESL student. So this is actually false. So in order to use IELCE funds, the class must be part of an IET. So we cannot use IELCE funding to fund any old ESL class. It must be in some way tied to an IET activity. So that's a common misconception. True or false? ESL classes can be offered using IELCE funding to an ESL student as part of an IET. This is true. So you can use IELCE funds as part of an IET, just not for an ESL class by itself. And true or false? State basic and state performance funds can be used in exactly the same way. So this is false. So state basic and state performance can be used for the same instructional categories. Both of them, as we said before, can be used for any of the instructional categories, but state basic has limits for instruction in program support and indirect costs, whereas state performance does not. So in order to find out a little bit more about this, again, you can check out Appendix C of the Adult Education Provider Manual. And so that is actually it for our training. I know that was really brief. So before I let you go, I'm actually going to take a minute to show you a newly posted page on the DAISI website. I think it'll be something that will be helpful to most of you. So when you go to the DAISI 2.0 user guide now, you'll find a new page called Updates to DAISI 2.0. It's right at the bottom of the topic areas. And it is designed to show you, to kind of just keep you posted about the updates that we're making to DAISI 2.0. Since I know a lot of people have been asking, like, when is this report going to be coming back, or when is this feature going to be happening? So this page is designed to kind of just keep you in the loop about that. So it has the updates that we've already completed, what we're working on right now. So right now on November 24th, when this training is being recorded, we're working on the student testing report and the bridge course search feature. And then it shows you items that are queued. So the items that we're going to be working on next once these are finished. And something that's kind of nifty about this is for these completed updates, if you're wondering how to use the attendance sheets or any of the other features that have been updated, you can just click the link and it'll take you straight to the instructions as to how to use that new feature. And then again, here's the contact information of the DAISI support desk, my contact information if you have any DAISI or policy-related questions, and regional support staff.